Record in progress.
Got it. And I will still record it on my on Zoom.
Okay.
Awesome. The only thing is, sorry, I don't know how to not to see it. Hide non-video participants, and it's not hiding.
Oh.
Which is unfortunate for the Zoom recording.
I wonder how that'll work. I've never actually tried that, so I don't know if it actually still shows up there or not when you use the Zoom recording.
You know what? I just go on speakers view. This should work.
There you go.
Awesome. Hello, Michael. Welcome to the show.
Great to be with you.
I hope this is recording now on Zoom.
Oh, okay. I thought we started.
Yes. Great to have you here. I've been on your show, very successful podcast where you interview the consultants. And I was intrigued by the work that you do. And so I'm looking forward to have a conversation with you, maybe not so much about facilitation, but about consulting and building a consulting business.
Sure.
And I still start with the same question. Do you call yourself a facilitator?
No, I do not. Do you want to know what I call myself?
I would love to, and what you understand by facilitation that you're so clear that you're not doing, that you're not calling yourself like it.
Well, I'll first say that what I refer to myself has changed over the years. So I've always called myself Michael, which is my name. So that's one constant, luckily. But in terms of a title or how I kind of describe what I do, that has changed over the years. There's always been an element of business owner because I started my first business with my cousin Sam 23, maybe going on almost 24 years ago. So at a pretty young age, and so that I've always had that. But in terms of that, probably changed as we started focusing more on consulting. So I would then, if somebody said, "What do you do?" I'd say I'm a marketing consultant because I really focused around the area of marketing. And sometimes when I'm crossing the border, just to confuse people, when they say, "What do you do?" I say I'm a consultant, which people don't know what to do with. Like they just have no idea what does that actually mean, because it really could mean a lot of different things. So it's always fun to say that. And the joke in the family is, for many years, no one really knew what I did. Like they thought something online, but beyond that, they had no real clue. So today, yeah, I mean, I work with consultants, I coach consultants, but really what I think of myself these days, because my role has shifted as our team has grown, as we've built out more frameworks and systems for our own coaches and our team to work directly with clients. I'm kind of a business owner, and I work with other businesses who happen to be consultants. And so I spend a lot of my time thinking now more about leadership, more about how to support our team as best as possible. My title probably somewhere says CEO, but at this size of a company, again, what does that really mean? So for me, it's just thinking more about leadership, but how can I make sure that I'm acting and behaving and moving things forward the way that hopefully encourages others to do something similar. But most importantly, I'm just trying to support our team and our clients as best as possible.
Yeah, thank you for these distinctions. And I find it fascinating what you said about how you introduced yourself as consultant and nobody knew what to do with this. And I think many in the audience will kind of smirk at that, because I had to laugh, because it's exactly what happens to facilitators most of the time. When I introduce myself as a facilitator, everyone goes like, what? Or they're also facilitators and like, oh, that's wonderful, me too. And then most of the time it happens that they are facilitating something totally else. So hence the confusion is still there, or even bigger.
Yeah. I mean, I think it just depends on how meaningful of a conversation you want to have with somebody. If you want to have a very meaningful conversation, you'll probably be more detailed in your response. But if you don't really want to have a meaningful conversation, you'll go very general just to get the point. And so that's the idea. It's like if I'm entering the US from Canada or going someplace, it's usually, in my case, going into the US, they'll ask, like, what do you do? And I'll say, I'm a consultant. And it's because, I don't want to have a conversation. Let's just, and
Not with
sometimes it's
immigration.
just kind of fun, but yeah, I find, beyond that, I'll often say, we run a coaching and training company that helps entrepreneurial consultants, build more profitable and scalable and strategic consulting businesses. And so that's a message that will obviously resonate if somebody is more of an entrepreneurial consultant, somebody who's running their own consulting business who wants those things. That's going to be more meaningful because it's going to connect more with them. So there'll be a higher chance that they're going to take interest or it's going to get their attention. Whereas if you're just more broad, I find you're not going to create typically quite a meaningful conversation around. It doesn't mean that it'll always play out that way, but that's my observation.
Yeah. And isn't it usually the problem with labels or titles? As you said, same line of thought. Being a CEO of a team of 5 to 10, can you call yourself a CEO? So what does this title or label actually mean?
Yeah,
and then,
I mean,
yeah,
it means, I guess, what you want it to mean, or if it's important to you. I mean, yeah, today we're, I guess, 16 or so people, but it's still a very small company in the scheme of things. And it's, I mean, more often when someone says, like, what's your role in the company, I'll just say I'm a co-founder.
yeah,
It's a company that I started 13 years ago with my cousin Sam, and that's about it.
beautiful. And since this is your actual domain, and I'm sure we have lots of freelance facilitators and consultants, coaches in the audience, because I guess, and we briefly talked about that on your podcast and before we hit the record button, although you consult mainly, or you coach, or you run a business, facilitation is still part of your business. And I would love, maybe you can share what kind of facilitation you do as part of your many hats and roles, and then dive deeper on what is actually the difference between a facilitator, a coach, and a freelancer, how to build a business, and then go more in the business side of things.
Okay, that question feels like it had many questions inside of it, so I'll try and unpack them. First, so the way I view consulting, coaching, freelancing, and facilitation, to me, facilitation is the role of a facilitator is to kind of navigate and guide and help to cultivate a powerful, effective, helpful, valuable conversation among many people. And I see the role of a coach, in most cases, not always, is to do something very similar, but it's one-to-one. So facilitation is a conversation among multiple participants. Coaching would be doing something kind of similar, right, to help to create a very an effective outcome or result, or to create value, or to help somebody see things that they aren't seeing right now, or to think things they're not thinking right now, but in a one-to-one scenario. And then consulting is providing your perspectives, your advice, your recommendations based on your experience and expertise, but also based on, in most cases, starting off with doing an analysis or really kind of looking at trying to identify what is really going on, and then giving direction as to how can you best solve that problem or achieve that outcome. Whereas in kind of the more mainstream or the typical way of thinking about coaching, you ask questions to try and get the person you're coaching to see the answers themselves. Whereas in consulting, there are elements of that. Like, you have to ask a lot of questions. And in fact, to be a successful consultant, it's critical that you know how to ask really deep, meaningful questions. But as a consultant, when you see the answers or you believe that you've kind of identified what is the core issue here so that you can make that improvement or solve that problem, you don't hesitate to tell the client what you see. And in fact, that's what the client is typically paying for. It's to have those recommendations and to have that level of clarity so they can figure out, how to best take action on that or move forward or make a change. So that's how I see those things. And you use also one other word, which I didn't talk about, which is a freelance person or a freelancer. And to me, freelancing is interesting because it could potentially kind of touch each one of those three things. It's somebody in my mind that just works with many different clients. They don't have a typical 9-to-5 job, but to me, a freelancer and a contractor are very similar. And I typically define those from what we call an entrepreneurial consultant, because you can be very good at something and you can do the work, right? You can deliver on that work. So let's say a client comes to you and says, we need help to develop a plan, or we need help to solve this technology problem, or we need a website, or we need a brochure, or whatever it might be. You would call upon somebody, and if they just deliver their expertise, right, they just help to solve that one problem or whatever the outcome is that you want, and then they kind of go on to the next piece of work. To me, that is, you can call them a contractor, you can call them a freelancer, you could even call them a consultant, but they're not what we call as an entrepreneurial consultant, because their focus is not actually building their business. The focus is just doing the work. And that's an area that we really make a distinction around. Is you can do that. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you actually want to build a business that is becoming more valuable, that can really, give you kind of long-term, more freedom, more flexibility, that grows financially as well. And ultimately, if you want to get to a place where you can be earning more and more money or creating more and more value without your day-to-day direct involvement, that's building a business. It's not just doing the work.
Yeah. And what I hear in that is the freelancer, whether you're a freelance facilitator, freelance coach, or freelance bricklayer, you have to do the work in order to earn money. If you don't get up to do work, to work for a client, you don't earn money. Whereas an entrepreneur earns money by delegation or while they sleep, basically.
Yeah.
And sorry.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt. You go ahead.
And what I heard from the distinction between the facilitator, the consultant, and the coach, and maybe it makes sense, maybe it doesn't make sense to you, but it's also in the preparation. So the facilitator would prepare by laying out a process. The consultant prepares by asking questions to understand what the case is, but then also to getting information and putting together knowledge to deliver a solution or to guide a conversation. And the coach basically doesn't really prepare or has prepared for a lifetime, so that they can then be fully present, listen, and ask questions that would help their coaching.
Yeah, I think that's a good observation. And I would add that the distinction with a freelancer and, let's say, that more entrepreneurial consultant, although you could apply this even, let's say, to the world of facilitation, which is, I know, Miriam, what you've done. You're not only a facilitator, you're building a facilitation, a business around facilitation. And so the distinction is the freelancer or the contractor just essentially shows up, does the work, and then they go and they just show up and do the work again and again. But if you're thinking as a business owner, or we call the entrepreneurial consultant, then you're not only thinking about delivering the work, and you're also thinking about, how do I build systems to deliver this work more effectively and efficiently, and how do I build more systems in place to maybe create more leverage, or productize my offerings, or bring in team members. So you're actually thinking about the business and not just the delivery of the work.
I would love to dig deeper into that, because so for me personally, I realized very quickly that this was actually what I was most interested in. So I started, as you said, as a freelance facilitator, facilitating workshops. And then very quickly I started with a podcast. I realized that there's more to that, and the business building. There's a lot of fun and building systems.
Yeah.
And hence, I would be curious how you got into that. Did you also start as a freelancer? And how do you know that it is time to build? Do you have to be... I have a better question. How did you start? And do you have to be a good freelancer to be a good entrepreneur in this domain? Do you have to be a good consultant in order to build a good consulting business?
Okay, great question. So I mean, there's two questions
Yes.
there, right? One is specifically about consulting, one is just in general. And then you also asked me about my own experience in the past. So no, I was not a freelance consultant or a freelance anything before starting our first business. So we started our first business when I was transitioning from high school into first year college. And what happened at that time was that my cousin Sam had really been studying deeply about kind of designing and developing websites. I had been reading a lot about marketing and communications, but I didn't have much practical, experience doing that. But we decided that we would create a company because we saw an opportunity where there was a lot of different businesses, initially locally, that didn't have nice looking websites. So we saw that as the opportunity. So we started going out using kind of connections that we had and, getting in front of people. And Sam's role was really focusing on the design, the development. My focus was much more on the client communications, kind of the running of that small business, right? The marketing, and that practical experience of running the business and working with, with different clients, not just one client and then find the next client. Like we were thinking about how can we work with multiple clients and projects at one time. So from a very early stage, the thinking that we had, and was to run it as a business. Now, I don't think that was something special. I just think that's the way it was. Like looking back, I can't think of why that happened in the way that it did. The only thing that I can point to is that it likely came from all the books that I was reading and trying to educate myself, and then very quickly applying what, in my case, I was learning, and then seeing whether that worked or it didn't work. And if it didn't work, then I think about what do we need to adjust to get it to work. And if it worked, we would just do more of that. And then once we had that experience, right, it just kind of rolled into the next business and the next business, and kind of went forward from there. In terms of the consultant, right, you have to be a great consultant to be a great consulting business owner. I think that, well, I'll back up for a moment. I cannot think of one person. I've been running a Consulting Success podcast now for a while, over 300 interviews. I can't think of one person that has or is running a successful consulting business that, if they're the founder, that did not first deliver consulting services themselves. And I think that for most businesses, that is important, because you need to understand the actual business and what's happening, and kind of have a feeling and a taste for the market and the challenges clients have, and know how to deliver. Now, my guess is that if we kind of zoom out and look at even larger organizations, larger consulting firms, you'll probably find some people that are in senior roles or executive roles that maybe didn't start off as a junior consultant and work their way up. But my experience and observation is that the majority did start, delivering the work, understanding it. And then with the types of consultants and, small firms that we work with, they're almost always founder led. And, they're coming into our world in some cases when they're getting started. Other cases, they have a small team and they're doing a few $million, dollars a year, and they're looking to get help to continue growing. Those people are almost always founder led, and they almost always started, if not always started, by actually doing the work, getting good at it, and then based on doing good work and, their network and referrals and marketing and whatever else they were using, that effectively kind of got them to that next stage. And now they wake up one day and go, yeah, I'm actually running a real business here. It's not just me delivering, my expertise anymore.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for walking us through. And I wonder whether this refers back to what you mentioned of building the processes and the tools as you grow, because only if you really master the craft,
yeah,
then you actually have this more macro view to be able to find patterns. Okay, what is it that I do? What is it that I do well? How can I build these processes? And then eventually when you delegate work, you need to know what quality looks like and feels like in order to hire the right people and to delegate to the right people.
Correct. Especially at the earlier stages. I mean, if you're not funded or if you don't have a lot of money when you start, right? Most people don't go off and their first hire is usually not for like a high level leadership position inside their company. It's typically I need an assistant, and then maybe I need somebody else to to help me to deliver the work, and I have a few of those people, and now maybe I need somebody to help with the operations or the management, right? And as time goes on, you hire for more senior roles as they become more necessary. But at the early stages, it's not usually necessary to say I'm going to hire somebody to do management operations, and I'm just going to continue doing all of the delivery myself. If you're the founder, that's usually not the case. You're usually trying to find ways to extract yourself from some of the day to day. Now, doesn't mean you're removing yourself completely. I've interviewed several people who run consulting businesses that are doing tens of millions of dollars per year, and those founders are still, in many cases, involved in delivery, but it's a percentage of their work. Like it might be 20, 25%. Maximum that I've seen is up to a third. But the rest of the time, it's other things they're doing in terms of actually running the business and leadership and things of that nature.
Which makes a lot of sense, especially in these kind of roles or jobs where you're a consultant, a facilitator, a coach, where very often we're also very passionate about what we do. So we're moving ourselves from that.
Completely.
And I wonder, when do you know that you're ready to actually get from being a freelancer, just basically doing the work, closing everything, and then you're done. Once you're back at home, you're done. There are no more headaches. When are you ready to take the step and make the first hire?
So it's a great question, and I'll start by saying that you don't need to take the step. Not everyone needs to. Not everyone should. Some people are going to be much better suited, and those would be happier, kind of being the the artist, if you will, and they don't have necessarily big financial goals, or there's no desire to create something more, and that's totally fine, right? So there's a lot of artisans out there, a lot of very creative people who are just happy to do the work, whatever that work might be. I think, but to answer your question, when do you take that step? It's when you wake up and you realize that you're ready to make a bigger impact. And a bigger impact can take many forms. So, that might be that you want to create more financial freedom for yourself. It might mean that you want to create more time freedom for yourself. It might be that you want to help more people. And that's probably one of the biggest ones. Like you mentioned a minute ago, Miriam, that you get into this kind of line of work because you want to help, right? You want to provide value, you want to serve people. That's what we see with consultants all the time. Like most consultants don't say, I'm going to start a consulting business just because I want to make a lot of money and go public and have hundreds of people. That's not what most people think. Most people think, I've been working for many years, I have expertise, I have experience. I'm tired of having a boss, or I'm tired of feeling like I'm being held back, or having somebody else checking, like looking over my shoulders, or having to work with people that I don't enjoy, working with, either colleagues or potential clients. And so they want to be their own boss. They want to realize their full potential. They want to have unlimited income earning potential. Like these are all the factors. And so if you kind of go back into that core, right, there's some things that are for you, but there's also a big part of just wanting to help more people. And so we've had many clients that have come into our world, one of our programs at Consulting Success, and then they're thinking initially, I'm leaving the corporate world, I'm leaving a senior role, and I'm tired of managing a bunch of people. I just want to do this myself and be nimble. And they're not interested in getting much bigger. But what very often happens is that as they start to establish some of the foundations and systems, and like they're now more in demand and they're becoming more successful, and they not only replace their previous income, but they're far kind of, they've exceeded it. they now become a little bit more comfortable because they feel that there is a bit of stability. They've proven to themselves that they can do it. And what then happens for most people is they go, okay, well, how can I do more? Right.
Mm.
And again, more of all those things. How can I create more freedom for myself? How can I make more money for myself and my family and those that I care about? But how can I also serve a lot more people? So if you have this expertise, if you have now validated that there is demand for it, the question becomes, how can you actually help more people and make a bigger impact? And if it's just you as one person, there's really a limit in unless you've productized, but that also means you're thinking about the business. But if you're just working one-on-one, custom kind of solution, right, there's going to be a limit to how many people you can actually make an impact on. And so when you get to that point, when you start thinking, oh, we want to work with more people, or we want to help more people, or we want to, right, fill in the blank, then that's where the strategy comes in. That's where the systems come in, the processes, the delegation, right? Because through all that, you're buying back your time, you're making more money, you're helping more people. So you need to have that desire, because it's not necessarily always easy. It takes work to create those things. But I've never really met many people who have said, like, I wish I didn't go through those steps. Most people go like, I'm so much happier now because I have a business and it can run without me to a degree, or there's a lot more value, or I have more freedom, or I'm creating an asset, or we're helping more people. So those are some of the benefits that I think people really desire, and that's what gets them to take that step.
Yeah, yeah, and it's what just crossed my mind is that you're stepping up, so you're starting to build systems and processes, and I just realized that now with all the AI opportunities that became so accessible, it's
Sure.
even easier, I think, to build in these systems and automations to design processes to make our own work easier before even thinking of hiring a virtual assistant or someone into the team. Because I remember I hired my first team member even before I could afford her, because I realized that if I continue to do the work in the way that I'm doing it, I just don't have the mental, emotional, physical capacity to onboard or to find any new client to show up as my best self. So I do need to delegate stuff that doesn't make me happy, that I'm not good at, in order to grow. And it worked out luckily quite well. But do you think, is this the normal way that maybe you should hire someone before you can even afford? Do you need to take this risk in order to grow when you hit the ceiling? Or what is the magic to growing?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that there's magic. I think if most people that I've asked this kind of question to, they'll tell you that they needed to bring somebody on, in some cases even a little bit before they actually were able to, but they knew that it was there. And there's a few things that happen, right? When you bring somebody on, again, whether they are freelance or contract or part-time or full-time, like this is also the thing when you talk about a risk. I don't think hiring is actually as risky as people think it is. Usually people that say that hiring is risky are the people that haven't really done a lot of hiring. And so they feel that it's risky because it's not comfortable for them. They're not used to it. But when you've gone through the process of hiring, you realize there's a lot of ways to go about hiring that aren't that risky, right? You can start off just hiring a freelancer or a contractor. You can get somebody part-time. And in many cases, then that gives you the opportunity to see how do they work? Do they deliver? Is it a good experience, good shared values? And then from there, it can become something much more. The other thing is, let's just say that you're bringing on somebody who, is relatively experienced. Maybe you're paying them $80,000 a year. Well, you're not paying them $80,000 on day one, right? Like you're gonna make them a payment either once a month or every 2 weeks, and so you'll know pretty quickly, right, whether this was a good decision. And so if it's not like you've paid $80,000 and you've lost it. You've paid a percentage of that, and that's a learning experience. And now you'll become stronger next. But yeah, so that's part of it. The other part of it too, Miriam, is that when you make an investment into hiring somebody in whatever form that is, it changes. I can't say that it changes your brain chemistry because I haven't done the studies to say that, but I believe that something changes in your mindset. Right? When you have now that additional capacity because you can take something on, you show up differently in the world, because you're going to have conversations with people now knowing inside that you actually have the greater capacity to take more on or to do more, which means that you start acting differently and thinking differently and talking differently, because you're not the same as you were before. You've made a decision that has changed your potential and your ability. And I believe this is true in many aspects of business and in life, that it's like when you surround yourself with people that are showing up bigger than you, right? So take a very simple example, and you and I know, like, life is not just about money, but let's just use the money example because it's an easy one for people to, I think, to understand. If you're right now generating $1 million a year and you sit in a room with people that are, let's say 5 or 10 other people that are all generating $8 or $10 million a year, you're going to learn some things. Like, you're going to start to see bigger opportunities that you probably haven't seen before, because today you, as that person earning $1 million a year, that the mindset that you have is the mindset of the person that makes $1 million a year. It's to make $10 million a year, as an example. That's a different mindset. So you probably don't even know certain things, or you've never thought that way. And so you're just going to you're going to get new ideas. You're going to be pushed to new levels. And again, this applies way beyond just money. This applies to, like athletics, or like health, or spirituality, or any area of life. It's like when you surround yourself with people, or you take actions that are different from what you've done before, or you're around people that help you to see those things, that you're just going to become a different person, and that changes who, your business and you.
Beautiful example. Thank you. And yeah, because I see two things in their why it works. One is the pure law of attraction. So starting with what you said earlier, once you hire someone, you have this new mindset.
Sure.
That also applies, I think, once you decide to start working with an expensive coach, the business coach. Suddenly you invest the money because you believe that you have the capacity to earn that back, because it's an investment. It's not an expense. Yep. And I think with any staff that you hire, it's similar. So then you have the law, or applying the law of attraction, that now you see opportunities and you will attract them because you have more capacity, you know what's possible, and then it will come your way.
And I think there's one other thing that if you don't mind, I'll add to that, which is that when you make a big investment into yourself, let's say working, with a coach, or whatever it might be, you now have a lot more on the line. You've made a big investment. Yeah. So you're most likely to take much bigger action, right? Or just take more consistent action than you would if you, let's say, pay somebody $100. I mean, right, someplace in the world that's a lot of money, but like, if you just don't show up or you don't take actions, like, not that big of a deal. But if you've invested $10,000 or $50,000, like, you're going to very much make sure that you take action or do whatever is necessary, because you have a lot more on the line. And I think that's a really interesting kind of piece for any business owner, any facilitator or business owner to think about. Most often, your clients the clients that pay you the least tend to also be those that are a bit more of a headache, because they require just the same amount of service and touch points and support, in many cases a lot more, because they are earlier stage, or even in their mindset. Right? They're not as mature in their mindset compared to somebody who's willing to invest a lot more. They're more serious, right? They typically see a very clear ROI. Like, they don't need to be hand-holded as much. They know that when things turn out the way they want, or they make progress, it'll be very well worth it for them. And so if you're right now charging very low fees, you're probably attracting a lower type of clientele. And I don't mean that in a derogatory or rude way, but low fees tend to attract, right, a lower quality or caliber of person. And I mean, like, how serious they are about whatever they're looking to accomplish. Because when you charge someone a much higher fee, again, they're going to show up, being serious about getting that result and following your recommendations. Otherwise, they wouldn't have paid that amount of money. And so now you've actually increased your chances of success. And that's in service of the client, because if they've invested more, right, they're going to take more action, which means that any advice you give them or any work that you do with them, they're going to appreciate a lot more, because they're going to see the benefit of it at a much higher percentage than somebody who's not paying that much.
Yes. To all of that. And I'm glad that you mentioned that it goes both ways. So us making the commitment to ourselves to put in the investment helps us to show up, to do the work, and then to make it back. But also the clients we work with. Because as you said, those who are not willing to invest in us, in the service provider, they won't prepare as well as either. And usually these are the ones that need, that feel better micromanaging, because actually then they want to do the work, because somehow there's trust lacking, that the work will be done in the way that they need it.
Yeah.
Agree. And I want to maybe go back a few steps, because I can imagine that some now sit in the audience and are like, well, it's fantastic that you talk about attracting the next 50 clients and outsourcing and hiring, but how do I find actually the first clients? So when they just start off, and with your background in marketing and having interviewed 300 successful consulting business owners?
Yeah, something along those lines, yeah.
How much is marketing? And what does marketing or self-branding even look like? And how much is just doing the work and showing up with quality?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, doing great work is a requirement, right? It's like having a good product can help you to generate not only initial business but follow-on business. If you have a bad product, even the best marketing is not going to help you, because even if somebody buys it once, they're not going to buy it again, and they're not going to talk about it in a very positive way. And so that's short term, right? Everything that we do, everything that we work with our clients on, it's always thinking about what's going to create a benefit for the long term, right? For you, for your clients, for communities that you serve, or the marketplace, or whatever is important to you. So what we see pretty consistently is, in fact, we do different surveys and studies at Consulting Success. 50% of people who, or 50% of a consultant's first client tends to be, or I shouldn't say tends to be, is a past employer. So now it doesn't mean that it's the one they just left, but it's at a past employer they had at one point. Is for 50%, for half of all consultants, that is actually, that becomes their first client. And for a lot of consultants, their initial client base, their first few clients, will come from their network and referrals. So for some, and for quite a few, right, they will be able to get things going just by getting in front of their network and referrals. A lot of people still struggle with that, because even if they have a network, they don't know what to say to their network. They don't actually even know, like, what should their focus be, who should their ideal client be, how can they put out a message that succinctly kind of explains what they do and who they do it for and how they help. So for some that are early stage, we help them with that whole piece, because you want to feel confident and clear on what you're actually doing, what you're offering, so that you can go out and have those conversations. And we see that, like, very, very clearly. It's easy to identify that people who do get initial business from their network and referrals, they have no problem explaining who they work with, how they work, what result they create. So you want to have that kind of that in place to feel confident to go out, because then when you do, then people will be able to say, yeah, talk to this person, or actually we can benefit from that. So that's initially. But what we also see very consistently, this is almost inevitable, that for the vast majority of consultants, at one point, that kind of referral well, right, the stream of opportunity, leads, and business that came from the people that they already know, that well, kind of starts to dry up, and they either don't get as many referrals or leads or conversations or activity as they used to. And so it starts to kind of, trickle, and almost like they can see, like, the end is coming to that flow. It's not as consistent as it was before. And in other cases, it's the realization for the business owner, for the consultant, that they know they want to get to that next level. Like, they see there's much greater potential, more opportunity, and they know that just relying on even the same amount of lead flow and that came to them before is not going to get them there. So whether that referral well is starting to dry up, or whether you just want to get to that next level, it's, again, inevitable that at some point you're going to need to kind of start marketing, because that's, again, marketing. You asked, like, what does marketing look like? Well, in the consulting business, This would be true as well, in facilitation and coaching in most ways. When you talk B2B, right, very different from B2C. So B2C is business to consumer. The way that you market and sell, for example, like a glass or a bottle of water, right? People will buy that without having a conversation, right? They can just see something online or go down the aisle in a store and they'll just buy it, right? If the brand is there or the price is right or whatever, they'll just buy it without they don't need a conversation. But when you're doing B2B, or what I'm starting to refer to as B2O, like so business to organization, because that could be a nonprofit or a for-profit, it can be small business or organization, or a multi-billion-dollar one. You always need a conversation. People don't just like click a button, buy, and have you show up to facilitate. At least from what I know, like usually there's going to be a conversation required, and that's because the investment is significant, right? It's usually going to be tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, or millions of dollars or euros or whatever currency you work in. So it's a significant investment. There's more risk involved, so it requires a conversation. So in our world at Consulting Success, when we're working with clients, marketing is all about providing value, right? Marketing is all about building relationships, and so the way that you show up is very different. And when you think about marketing in the more B2C kind of approach and sales approach, people tend not to feel comfortable around marketing because they feel it has to be very promotional, very one-sided. They feel that marketing is something that you do to somebody, whereas in our world, marketing is something that you do for somebody. You do it to help them. You do it to serve them. You do it to provide value for them. You show up in a more personal way as opposed to just sending tons of automated messages or the same message to every single person, right? You're really thinking more about how can you provide value to people? How can you show up right in that way? And so, yeah, marketing really becomes much more about the value and the relationship.
And would that then be what we often refer to as content marketing, so providing content and showing up as a thought leader? Or does it mean, for instance, doing free work, inviting to a webinar, or offering a free, and I think even for a consultant, it can be offering a free workshop?
Yeah. So, first let's look at the word thought leader, right? Which a lot of people use these days and have for several years, right? So thought and leader. Well, everyone has thoughts, right? Not everyone necessarily can be a leader or is willing to be a leader. So the idea of thought leadership is you have thoughts and you make sure that you put them out into the world. I think the distinction of what makes somebody a successful thought leader or somebody that struggles with that idea of thought leadership is whether your ideas and the content and your intellectual property essentially is what you are sharing. Is it actually unique and valuable? Right? Nobody really cares about just more general information. And if they've seen that information before, if there's nothing new in what you're putting out, it's not valuable. And so that to me means that you have thoughts, but you're not being a leader. So to be a thought leader, you need to have new insights, bring in some data, or you're sharing stories, or you have a new perspective. You have to essentially think of ways to give an advantage to the buyer, right, to the marketplace, so that they are actually welcoming what you are sharing with them. And to your question, Miriam, I mean, is that content marketing? Is it webinars? Is it free work? In my mind, and what I've seen over the last decade plus, or I guess two decades of consulting, but a decade plus now, 13 years of actually working with consultants specifically, is that the most effective way to sell consulting services is actually through content. And what I mean by that is that content, what we call specialized content, so this idea of not just general ideas, but content that is created specifically with your ideal client in mind, is the most impactful way, most effective way to demonstrate value. And so you get to sell without selling. So if we know each other, right, you might just be comfortable to buy from me. If you get a referral, somebody says, Michael's amazing, you might feel comfortable. Again, there's a transfer of value through that endorsement or through that connection. And if we have a conversation, right, then if I'm asking you really deep, meaningful questions, I'm hopefully transferring some value. You feel confident and comfortable there. But the vast majority of outside of that, in terms of when you're reaching out to new people, those three things haven't happened. So how do you transfer value, right? If you haven't actually talked to somebody, well, the way that you do that is through your content. But your content needs to be unique. It needs to be specialized. It needs to be valuable. And if you put yourself in the position of a buyer who's consuming your content, meaning maybe they're reading an article that you wrote someplace, or they hear you give a talk, whether it's in person at a conference or an event, or maybe through a trade association or an industry association, and it's delivered as a webinar online or an executive briefing, you're delivering, as long again as the content, the ideas, and what you're sharing is valuable to that buyer, you don't need to sell, because they're consuming that content, again, whatever format it's in, and they can't help but think to themselves, well, this person really understands this topic. They've solved those kind of problems before. Like I can see myself in that, or we're about to start an initiative or a project in that area. Like I should probably talk to this person, or so this is the kind of stuff that and why specialized content and why this idea of thought leadership, when executed effectively, is so powerful, because you're selling without actually having to sell it. You're simply demonstrating value. And so now it becomes very easy for a buyer to just go, yeah, I should probably talk to that person.
It becomes a pull mechanism. And now I want to circle back to what you said in the very beginning. So when you start working with a client, the first thing you do is to make sure that they know how to communicate and how to reach out to their network. So unless you have this, let's call it elevator pitch, for no better word, this 90 seconds, whatever explanation of what you do, then you cannot even create this valuable content, because you don't know who your target audience is.
Correct.
And I think I just want to emphasize the importance of that, because I think in this freelance world, whether they're coaches, facilitators, or consultants, they forget, again, what you said before, that there is usually a certain word that comes before consultant, facilitator, coach. What kind of those are you? And if you don't know that, and if you don't know who your target client is, or you don't want to specialize, niche down because you're afraid to lose all these potential clients, you actually lose the entire market, because nobody knows where to place you.
Yeah, I mean, so the process that we take our clients through, this might be helpful just to illustrate for everybody. The first thing we always do is we look at what's called ideal client clarity. And that's really about identifying who is your dream client, right? You're creating a business. You have now the opportunity to work with whoever you want, right? And so let's figure out who. We've set a criteria that we go through to help them to kind of get very clear on this whole exercise. But the goal of that is for them to feel confident that they're focusing on the right type of ideal client, which might be an industry or a type of buyer. So kind of they go through that. Now, once you have that, now you can develop a message. We call this the magnetic message. So this is the message that gets the attention and interest of your ideal clients. When people often, Miriam, they'll say like, yeah, my marketing isn't working. I'm trying all this different stuff and I'm just not getting results. Almost always we can trace that back to that they aren't clear on who their ideal client is, and they don't have a magnetic message. So you can, you can yell from the rooftops and get in front of all these people who are potentially ideal clients. But if you don't have a message that's going to get their attention, it's like, you think about how many ads and messages you and I see, everybody sees every single day. Like there's thousands, if not tens of thousands of these messages every single day that we're seeing on all these different platforms. The vast majority of them, if I ask you, at the end of the day, which ads today like really got your attention, you probably have absolutely no idea, because we're all just seeing so much. And most of what we see doesn't resonate with us because it's not speaking directly to us. But if you think about the example of, let's say you have really bad neck or back pain, and if all of a sudden somebody shows up and they put an ad in front of you, it's on television, or you get an email and it's for like, go to this website and you can learn 5 different stretches that will instantly relieve, or in 30 seconds will relieve your neck and back pain. Like you're probably going to explore that because it's so relevant to you. And that's what most people tend to miss, is their messaging is not speaking to anybody directly. And you're competing with more people vying for the attention, right, of your ideal client more than ever before. And it's only going to continue to increase. So the message needs to be specific to that ideal client. Once you have that, now you can start to reach out. You can, send what we call network reactivation, different emails and messages to prospective ideal clients, or people that might be able to refer you to your ideal client. But you can do that with confidence and typically seeing a really good result, because you're identifying specifically who you actually want to, target and help and engage with. And now it becomes easy for people to either refer you business or to say, yeah, that sounds like me, we should have a conversation.
Yeah. And then coming back to what you said earlier, you can only build such a business if you're really good in what you do. because only then you really understand what the problems or the pains for this magnetic message. I love the term magnetic message. It attracts all the leads, so magnetic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Only then you can actually refer to it, put it in their words, and
Yeah.
provide a quick fix so that you can build the trust that you need in order to sell your service, because it's a trust business.
Yeah,
Okay.
and this is also why many people, when they want to kind of offload their marketing or lead generation to lead generation companies or other marketing companies or agencies, why they tend to be very disappointed and not see results. It's because essentially what you're saying to, let's say, that agency or whoever you're delegating this to, you're asking them to learn about your marketplace. And so if you don't already know enough about your market, it's very hard at the early stages for them to get results because they don't know your market that well. And so they need time, typically it can be, many months, to test a lot of different things to try and get something that actually resonates. And for most entrepreneurs, they don't have the patience or in some cases the budget to wait that long. And so they cut pretty quickly, seeing, kind of dismal results. And what our recommendation generally is do this work initially yourself. Go to the market, see what's working, validate, have conversations, adjust. Then once you get to a place where your business has actually validated, there's demand, there's some good traction, you're winning business, you're starting to build your pipeline, then you might consider to delegate or bring in an agency or something else, because you can already say, here's what's working, here's what my clients and buyers want. Like, you already have that intelligence, which then makes the marketing and scaling that up a lot easier. But doing it from without that kind of knowledge and understanding is very challenging.
Yeah. Yeah, and trusting someone that they know it better than you
Yeah.
is throwing spaghettis against the wall and seeing what sticks.
Correct. Yeah.
It can be very messy. What do you think of free work? And I'm asking because
yeah.
so there are many different types of free work, and I know from certain facilitators, or at least in the facilitation community, it's quite normal to offer free workshops to other communities. So this is one type of free work. But then there's also the free work that you can offer actually to clients and say, okay, you get the first session for free to learn for yourself.
So the former, I mean, that first example, I would look at that and kind of almost put that in like the marketing department. So let's say you go and you want to, you've been offered to give a talk at an association, a group, whatever. If your ideal clients are inside of that room or online in the audience, then that's marketing, right? And so even if you get paid to deliver that talk, if your business, if you have something that you can offer to those people afterwards, then you might deliver that talk for free, but maybe you land one client and it's worth $30,000 or whatever that number is. And so it makes sense that you didn't try and make $2,000 or $5,000 on that talk. Now, if your business is speaking, or that's like a real revenue channel for you, then yeah, you're going to be charging $5,000 to $50,000 or more in some cases, depending on like who you are and your level of kind of penetration into that market and visibility and so forth. But for most people on that front, no issue there. I think that makes complete sense to view those kind of opportunities as marketing. The one distinction or one note that I would really just encourage people to kind of like underline and look at is, are your ideal clients likely to be in that room? Because if they're not, then that may not be the best use of your time. I mean, yes, sometimes luck, serendipity, somebody's in that room and it turns into something. Like, I'm a big believer of just taking action, and you never know what's going to happen unless you actually do, take action and meet more people. So I think that's positive, especially in the early stages of your business. But I've seen a lot of people donate their time to being on boards or teaching at schools or giving talks, but they're not really intentional with that. And so they end up giving a lot of that away and nothing really ends up coming back to them because it's not focused. So if you can make sure that your ideal clients are there, or there's a high likelihood, I think those are fine opportunities, especially in the early stages, to explore. The other example that you mentioned, or kind of case, is doing free work for clients. And I think that's completely fine at the very early stages. So if you're just getting going and maybe you don't have a good case study, or you don't have a good testimonial, or you've been working in A industry, but you really want to be in B industry. And so you do a bit of free work in B industry just to get that testimonial, to get that case study, to demonstrate, your knowledge and expertise and skills. that's fine. My overall thought though is that that should typically be a smaller scale project. So let's just say that your typical engagement runs 6 months. You'd find a way to maybe make that first one, 2 weeks or 4 weeks, and use that as a bit of a case to prove that you can actually deliver on what you say that you can. And then the other thing around that, I mean, it ties into this as well, into that last point, is that you can, from a billing perspective, you can say to the buyer and in your invoice, and of course, nothing that I'm sharing here is legal or financial advice. It's just based on my experiences and what I've seen work for many others. But in your kind of invoice or agreement, you would treat it as if you were actually winning that business, and you would state that this is, as an example, $15,000 in value, but you are writing it off. Like you're covering that to show them that you can deliver. And so the client still views it as, oh, they've got an invoice for $15,000, but you've put a note in there that you are essentially covering that cost. So now they still value that as 15,000. You're not just saying that you're just doing it for free. So I like that, and I like that more than saying this is $15,000, but since I'm new, I'll just do it for for $5,000. To me, the discount thing, I don't feel as comfortable with that. I don't think that's as strong of a positioning to say to somebody, hey, I'll do this for less because I'm not as experienced. I'd rather just say, I'm just going to cover this completely. Let me demonstrate. That's how confident I am that I can, hit this out of the park or really help you to make progress or gain greater clarity. So I'll just cover this first stage. There's 5 stages. I'll do the first part for you completely free, but here's what it would typically be in terms of value. That's how I would kind of think about it.
I love that, because it states the value also brings clarity that if the client wants to continue to work with you, there's full transparency on how much this would actually cost. And yeah, the discount is a funky thing. And as you say, it sounds almost as you're dismissing the real price if suddenly it's possible to get it cheaper. So what is the value of the real price if the discount is there?
Yeah.
What is the biggest mistake a starting consultant, entrepreneur, consultant or coach or facilitator can make their career?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll speak to the world of consulting because it's really where I have the most personal experience. And we've started to kind of nibble at this a little bit on the edges, but it's that people don't have real clarity. They haven't truly defined who their ideal client is and what this is the key. They haven't defined what they want to be known for. And so if you don't define what you want to be known for, then you're essentially asking the market to define you, and they may define you in a way that that actually isn't what you want to be known as. So the more specific that you can be and intentional around who your ideal client is, what your specialization is, what value you really want to create, what kind of things you do and what kind of things you don't do, the more of those kind of parameters that you can set and then communicate, then that's going to help you to establish what you want to be known for. And a big part of that, though, is not just saying it, it's also showing it. And the showing it comes through what we call, again, specialized content. It's through putting ideas out there that are valuable. It's one thing for me to say, like, yeah, I'm a really great business owner. Sure, like maybe you'll take my word for it, maybe you won't. But if I can put out content that demonstrates that I am an accomplished entrepreneur and that I've achieved these things or had these successes, and like if I can again demonstrate that, then you don't need to believe my words. You can see it through what I'm sharing, right? But what I'm sharing has to be valuable enough that I don't need to persuade you that it's the truth. You need to essentially, the goal is that you persuade yourself through what I'm sharing, that you now feel, oh, wow, this person really knows what they're talking about in this specific area.
Yeah.
But most people don't even decide what is the area. And so they end up going very, very broad and just saying like, yeah, I can do X for, A, B, C, D types of people. And now you're not really connecting with anybody because you're casting such a wide net.
Yeah. Yeah. Knowing what you want to be known for, that's magic. And it reminds me of something that I was once advised, that you have to be clear in your messaging that whenever someone, you know, when your friends are going to a pub or a bar and meet your ideal client, and this person tells them about their problem, you want your friend or whoever to say, you should talk to Michael.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what is it that their potential ideal client needs to tell their friend or contact to be referred to?
I mean, most people that you know probably don't really know what you do in general, right? And so this is the whole thing, is the clear that you can be about who you work with and how you help and what results you create for them. Like the more focused you are and the more that you communicate that to people, the more opportunities you're creating for people to talk about you or to introduce you or to send you a referral, right? To reach out to you. So it's really critical. And it also is, this is the hard part. It's counterintuitive because in the world of consulting, when you bring all these years of different skills you've developed, all these years of working with different kinds of organizations or in different industries, the challenge that people have is that your mind is telling you, I bring this really diverse knowledge and I can help all these kinds of people, and isn't more better? Well, it's in fact not, right? If you look at the companies that tend to grow or see the greatest kind of success, their growth and the scaling and so forth comes from subtraction, not from addition. It's about removing things, not adding things. And the reason for that, when you kind of really study it, it becomes very apparent, which is that if you're adding more and more stuff, it's just harder to be known for any one thing because you're adding more and more. But if you're taking away, and if you're just saying, this is the bullseye, this is what I want to be known for, this is the one area that I specialize in, this is the type of market or industry or type of client that I have a background or I want to really focus on, well, now you can become known around that and your content can support that. But if you're going broad, then you're going to lose the potential power that comes from concentration.
Yeah. And I think this is even, thank you for sharing that. And I think it's even backed by behavioral science or marketing research, because I remember that there was research showing that if you have a product in 3 different variations or in 3 different colors, you go, oh, which color do I want?
Sure.
Whereas if there are many different products, you think, do I actually want one of those products?
Yeah.
So the brain reacts very differently. And that's why also the 3 tiers in pricing work so well.
Yeah. So yeah, 3 tiers, like in pricing, you said 3 tiers work very well because of the concept called anchoring, right? In psychology. I think there's a book related to this topic called The Paradox of Choice, which essentially says that the more options or the more choice you give people, the more kind of confused they tend to be, and the more unhappy that they are. And it's funny, like when you travel the world, I think one of these examples is like you'll often go to places, or if you ever been to a place where people tend to be poor, or they don't have as much material or as many material things as you or your society have, but they're always like, they tend to be smiling and happier people. I know I've experienced this when I've been in Southeast Asia, for example, like in Vietnam or Thailand, or just people like are happy and smiling and joking. And then you go to, let's say, somewhere in North America or in Europe, and people may not be as happy. And of course, that's a bit stereotypical, and it's certainly not all encompassing. But I have certainly noticed that the more you sometimes give somebody, right, the less happy they are. So that's one side of it. But I think really what we're talking about is just from being known for something. It's if you try and put too much out there into the world to try and cover all the ground and not lose anything, in fact, what you're doing is actually holding yourself back.
Yeah. And I wonder whether it's also about putting suddenly the responsibility of making sense and being focused on your potential client instead of delivering that already. So if I give my potential client a list of 100 services that they could buy from me, I ask them to know what they need. If I say, okay, this is what I do, then they can trust me that I can deliver it. And then in a first exploration call whatsoever, I can then help them to differentiate.
So a few examples of this. Let's say I give you a 100-page report. What do you do with it? Compared to, let's say, I give you a 10-page report. What's that?
I put it in a drawer. Yeah,
exactly, right? So if I give you a 100-page report, you put it in the drawer. If I give you a 10-page report, you probably start reading it right away, right? More actionable. Another example, let's say that which is going to be, this has changed over time, but just for an image kind of to help maybe kind of get the point across, imagine that you ask your computer to find one file on the whole computer, and you have 50,000 files, and you're saying search the whole computer to find that one file, as opposed to saying search for this one file inside this one folder. Which will you get a faster response? And so this to me is the example of when you want to get referrals. If you say to people, I work with business owners, or something like very general like that, what you're asking that person to do is to scan their whole mental hard drive, and that's going to take them a heck of a lot longer than if you just say, I work with executive directors of nonprofits that are typically blah, blah, blah. Like if you're very specific, now they just need to scan that one little file in that one little area of, do they know anyone in nonprofit, blah, 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 like executive directors? Yes, no, easy, done. So the more specific that you are, to your point, Miriam, the easier it becomes for people to actually help you to identify, because you've established those parameters. Whereas if you give them something very big and broad, you're putting the onus on them, and you're making them do all the work. And the other thing too that comes from this is, if you're more of a generalist as opposed to a specialist, right? In society, most societies in the world, which tends to be perceived as a greater expert, or to have more authority, or to be able to command more value, right? So you have a general doctor, family doctor, let's say, compared to a brain surgeon. Well, of course, a brain surgeon, right? Most people think must be quote unquote smarter. Not always necessarily the case, but their work is more quote unquote valuable, right? It's people pay more money for it. Why? Because there's more specialization, as opposed to just saying, yeah, it's a general, accountant compared to an international tax accountant, something like that.
Yeah, and it's great examples, and I think it refers also to what we call the scarcity or the abundance mindset. So with the scarcity mindset, there are not enough clients, right, I need to serve them all and to be general. Whereas the abundance mindset, yes, there is enough, so I can specialize and target a small group.
Yes, yeah, 100%. So we've seen this in a lot of studies that we've done. If you look at most consultants, and again, I'll define this with the kind of the parameters of, from a solo independent consultant to, let's say, a consultant that maybe has 10, 15 employees, give or take. Most of those ranges of kind of smaller consulting firm, they work with between 6 and 20 clients per year, and that allows them to hit their income goals. So you don't need hundreds or thousands of clients. Yet the mindset that most people have is that they think like, oh no, I need to get in front of as many as I possibly can. I need as many opportunities, right? I want to cast a wide net. But if you actually look at it, first of all, there's way more business and prospective clients out there than any one company can handle. And there's certainly way more opportunities than you as a small company can handle. So, right, like when you're clear on that, it becomes, you go, oh, okay, I guess if I actually think about it, if I focus on a specific type of ideal client, not like I can resonate more with them, I can create more content, like I can be there for them, right? I can really establish myself and be known for that. And there's way more opportunities in just that one market than even I can handle. It just almost becomes foolish to try and cast a bigger, wider net early on in your business.
Yeah, and it's so much easier to then have build relationships, build trust, have focused conversations to then learn even more about that niche, and build, maybe something like thought leadership.
Yeah.
What remains your biggest challenge as a business owner or as a consultant?
It's a great question. I think there's not one thing that comes to mind for me. I think it's not challenge singular, it's challenges plural, right? There's just always so much to learn. I think for me, that's actually why I like business, why I enjoy, being an entrepreneur and being a business owner, is that there's always room to improve, right? There's always something that, like, even when we kind of get from one level to that next level, we're already thinking about, well, what does that next level look like? And that's something that we have to always, or that I personally try and balance, because my goal is not just to make more money, or it's not just like the game of doing that. It's I want to continue to craft and create something that that provides value to everybody involved, to our clients, to our team, myself, to my family, with a very clear focus on lifestyle and enjoying the moment and living, just like none of us ever know how long we have. And so let's make sure that we're living in the moment as much as we can and appreciate it. So that for me is always a big focus. But from a challenges perspective, I mean, there's like just so many of them, right? Like every area of business always challenges, because I think if you can't see a challenge, it means that you can't see an opportunity, right? In every area, there has to be a challenge, because there has to be a way to improve, unless you're not looking to improve. So that might be a bit far out there. Like that's maybe one of those the kind of comments that you have to kind of sit with for a little bit. I think I probably need to sit with it too. But as I'm speaking right now, like, and you asked that question, and this is not something that this wasn't like a question that you kind of sent beforehand, or this didn't come to mind for me beforehand. So as I talk about it now, I think that if you, in any area of business or in life, if you can't see an opportunity to improve, then it's probably not an area that's very important to you. Like if I think about my relationship with my wife, right, or my kids, there's always room for improvement. Like I know I can be a better husband, I can be a better father. If I just said like, oh, I'm great, I'm perfect, there's nothing for me to get better at, it's probably not very important for me to think about those things. So to me, a challenge is the exact same thing as an opportunity. It's like when people use the word mistake, I don't view, I've made a heck of a lot of what people call mistakes, but in my mind, a mistake is not a bad thing. It's just a learning experience. Every mistake that or learning experience that I encounter just makes me stronger. It's like when a team member does something that I don't like, or I think like, why'd you do that? That was kind of dumb, or like that, that didn't work out well. But in my mind, I go, okay, well, that's fine. Like as long as we're learning from that, then we're all going to get better. And the goal of what we're doing here is just for all of us to continually get better and enjoy the journey, and enjoy the work that we're doing as we continually work towards getting better together.
Yeah. So the challenge is a mindset challenge, and to continuously be in that place. And I think that's okay. This could be then be an entire different conversation. How to create space for yourself to actually have that mindset, because I think we all know it, and I assume that you're no exception, because you're human. But if we are stressed, if we are overwhelmed, if in a bad place, then we might not see this mistake as a challenge and learning opportunity, and be
Completely.
grateful that we have challenges in our marriage, because it is important to us.
Yeah.
So I think the what I hear and what you say, what resonates very deeply for me, is the challenge to have this balance, overall balance, to be prepared for all these challenges. Because as you say, the good business, every day I wake up, there's something else that I haven't done before, and that is somehow challenging.
Sure. And you could wake up and feel very stressed by that, thinking, well, I'm so behind, look at all these things I haven't accomplished, or I see all these people around me on social media who are so much, quote unquote, more successful. Like somebody could have that mindset, and that could really stress them out. Or you can be the opposite and go, okay, I've accomplished some good stuff over the last week or months or year. Like, look at where I am today compared to back then. Look at how much more I still have to grow and that to experience and learn. It's the exact same reality, but it depends on what you focus on. To me, like you mentioned this word mindset a few times. And I think as you were speaking right now, and it's probably been subconscious for me. I mean, I wrote a book about mindset called The Elite Consulting Mind. Like it's all about mindset for consultants specifically, but it applies to just business in general, with a bunch of stories from clients and experiences and all that. But I really think, Miriam, that all of life is its mindset. Just the more that you get to learn, the more that you learn about yourself, the more time you kind of spend thinking about your thoughts and how you process them, and what makes you angry and what makes you happy and what causes fear, and like just all these things. The more that you spend time on that and become kind of comfortable with it and learn from it, then life just becomes what you want it to be.
Especially, yes, especially if you're in a people's business, if you're working with other humans, if you're providing these services, then it is through our mindset and how we rest in ourselves that we don't get triggered, that we can
Sure.
communicate clearly,
Yeah.
that we don't have these confrontations that are unnecessary. One more question. I have two more questions before we close.
Sure.
One is, and I would bite my butt if I didn't ask, as a podcast host with 300 episodes, because I get asked the question a lot, and I would be curious in your answer. To what extent was the podcast a vehicle, a door opener for your business success? And would you still, follow-up question, would you still recommend people nowadays to still start a podcast?
Okay, so first part, in the early days, it was not. In the early days, we did not see a real benefit, like a financial business kind of result or benefit from it. And so, if we go actually back many years, we had version 1 of the podcast, and we stopped after a few years because we were looking at like spending all this time, and we were just kind of comparing this to other areas we were spending time in the business, and other areas seem to be producing better results. So we just said, let's focus on what's working and not as much on what isn't. What was interesting though is then a couple of years or so went by, and I just had the feeling that the podcast needed to come back. But I said to the team, and this time it was a much smaller team, I said, the only way that like we're going to restart this podcast is if we have systems and processes in place for it. Like all I really want to do is a bit of research, but like show up and interview the guest, and that's it. I want everything else I don't want to touch. And so we did that, and then fast forward now many years since that point, and I can tell you without a doubt, our podcast has a very positive impact on the business. And so yes, it's a great asset. And in our space, it's very popular and established. So now to the second part of your question, would I recommend somebody do it? And 100% yes, but there's like some big buts here, right? And I'll give you two of them. The first is that it should be something that you enjoy doing. So don't do it just because somebody else says that it's good for you to do if you're not going to enjoy it. You need to enjoy it, or you need to be open to learning to enjoy it. But if you're not going to, then don't even think about it. And that then connects directly to the second part of this, which is you need to come into it, or I would encourage you to come into it with a very long-term mindset. So a podcast is not one of these things where in most cases you do a podcast and you start seeing your business growing, and like, because that's what we experienced, right? My expectation was that we would start seeing results sooner, and it just didn't happen. But my belief, based on my own experience and talking to many other podcast hosts over the years, is that if you stick with it for the long term, then it's going to be very beneficial for your business and likely for you. And there's many different ways you can use a podcast. I mean, I know some people use their podcast, and we actually kind of help our clients with some of this at times, is that you can actually use a podcast to interview your ideal clients. So it can be a vehicle to getting in front of your ideal clients, which can actually be a very good business kind of development tool. Others, like for us, we don't do it that way. We just interview people who we think, okay, this is a successful consultant or somebody that can add an interesting kind of dimension for our audience. And there's no goal of that person becoming a client of ours. It's happened sometimes, but it's not intentional. We're really just thinking about our listeners and our audience and the community when we kind of decide who we're going to have on the podcast.
Beautiful. So what I hear is there are basically two ways. Either your guests are your ideal client, or your audience is your ideal client.
It could be both, though. It could be both.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which then again circles back. Do your homework. Know your ideal client. Niche down.
100%. I mean, yeah, like I don't think it would be a good idea, and somebody can prove me wrong on this, but I wouldn't recommend that somebody starts a podcast on like business right now unless they're willing to figure out how to make that like the best podcast on business in general. It's just because there's so much competition. But if you create a podcast for let's say agriculture executives with a specific focus, like well, yeah, you could probably stand out and be known for that because there isn't as much competition in that area.
Yeah.
So it all comes back to really identifying who's the dream client, and who do you really want to serve and build around, and then you can start to figure out the best ways to create value for them. And a podcast might be one way. Maybe you're better on camera and you want to do YouTube videos. Maybe you're a social media, person and you love that, and then you figure out a way to do that. Maybe you write articles, you give talks. Like there's a lot of different ways to demonstrate value and to put that in front of your ideal clients. But you first need to know who your ideal client is, so you can figure out how you then get a message in front of them.
Yeah. Thank you. I always ask the one question that I haven't asked, and I try to find a twist, and maybe I don't even need a twist. I ask it anyway. So the question is, how do you make a workshop fail? And I know that you don't do many workshops as such, but still you talked about helping your clients to find their ideal clients.
Yeah. So we actually do quite a few workshops. I'd say I do less overall facilitation, although we run like a couple live masterminds a year for some of our clients. And so I'll facilitate that, or some weekly calls with clients. I'll facilitate some of those. But on the workshop front, I think the big thing that I always try and focus on is implementation. So I think a workshop where the person hosting the workshop is just giving information, but they're not providing an opportunity for people to implement, or they're not providing the opportunity for somebody to receive some ongoing support. Like if there's no mechanism for either direct implementation in that workshop, or no mechanism for follow-up support, to me, that's where things fail. And I think the data supports that. I don't have the numbers, at my fingertips, but where I see a lot of both coaching and workshops and things of that nature really not create value is like, it's very common for somebody or people to be in a workshop or to be in some kind of an event, and they're so excited by the ideas and like they're just jazzed up and energized and motivated, and then you talk to them even a few days later and like for sure the next week, and they've forgotten half of what they learned, if not more, and they've implemented almost nothing of it. And so to me, it's a workshop or any kind of education should not be a drug, right? It should not be something that just like makes you high and excited in that moment, and then there's no benefits long term. I think for me, as somebody who spends time, teaching and working with people and sharing ideas, the goal for me is not just to share an idea. The goal is to figure out how can we do this with a desire to really make an impact, and the impact really only happens when action is taken and implementation, right, is in place. So with all of our programs and the work that we do with clients, that we're always just trying to think, how can we make sure that we're not just giving information, but we're actually like the client is going to see transformation, or to create transformation, or to create a result or a positive outcome or progress. So those are the kinds of things we're trying to always engineer.
A workshop shouldn't be a drug. Thank you so much, Michael.
Hey, Miriam, thank you. I enjoy the conversation and always enjoy speaking with you. So thanks for having me on.
We'll put all the links to find you and your business and your podcast in the show notes.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. That's the end of the podcast jingle.
Okay.
And now it doesn't say stop recording because I think it's still recording on Fathom.
Zoom. Okay. All good. No problem. Let me know if there's anything else that you need or that I can help. Great questions, fun conversation. Always nice speaking with you.
Yeah, loved it. Thank you. I will send you, I think it comes out, I don't know, maybe in 5 weeks or so.
Okay.
I'll send you the one-page summary before to check. You send me all the links that you want to have in there. And I see you soon for the mastermind. I forgot when it is, but I will be there. And I thought I'll do a little bit a workshopy thing on asking questions.
Love it. Sounds fantastic.
Learning how to ask better questions. I think that's very suitable for a mastermind.
Sounds good. I think, so Naomi should be in touch with you if she hasn't been already, but any questions you have or anything, she'll take care of it.
All good.
Okay. All right, Miriam, have a wonderful evening.